of rain in the north, though, will just begin to shift its way further towards parts of Lewis and Harrison into the Highlands. It will be another mild day on Tuesday, but rain later on in the day will signal a slight change for the middle part of the week, and we will start to see those temperatures falling a bit closer to average for the time of year. Bye-bye.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like.
Absolutely.
On Dubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm standing in for Alastair Stewart today, and may I just say how much of an honour it is to be keeping the seat warm for such a legend of broadcasting. So if you're at home watching Alastair, thank you very much indeed. It is a real privilege. So for the next 2 hours, I will be keeping you company on TV and radio, of course, with the stories that really matter all over the country. We'll be looking at two of the biggest stories, really. We'll be talking energy profits. Is it right to say that they're profiteering from our misery? Or is there more to it? We'll also be looking at trust in policing, which seems to be at a pretty much record low at the moment, and much more, of course. But first, let's get the latest news headlines with Aaron Armstrong.
Good afternoon, it's 1:01. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. Boris Johnson's warned the Prime Minister dropping the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill would be a great mistake. Yesterday, Rishi Sunak and the European Commission President said they'd made very good progress on fixing issues with the contentious post-Brexit trading arrangements. Now, the Protocol Bill, introduced under Boris Johnson, gives the UK the right to ignore EU rules, which Brussels views as a breach of international law. Leader of the House of Commons, Perry Mordaunt, told GB News Mr Johnson's intervention highlights the bill's function as an important bargaining chip.
I think, it's helpful to remind the EU that we have the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill. It's helpful to remind them what those expectations are. But I would also just say that, look, there are encouraging signs. There is, people are saying there's a lot more to do, but progress is being made.
Well, political commentator Dr John Coulter says Mr Johnson's intervention on Brexit, his first since leaving office, could have serious ramifications.
Solving the protocol deal in Northern Ireland will guarantee the security of the peace process for, I would say, the next generation. Now, what Boris has done is really thrown a Trojan horse into the political negotiations here. Originally, the protocol was always seen as the European Union punishing the UK for daring to democratically vote to leave the European Union. So we've got to get a solution to the protocol.
Sir Keir Starmer says he wants to be the Prime Minister for the UK and not just of the UK. Addressing the Scottish Labour conference in Edinburgh, he urged voters to take another look at the party, saying the tide is turning on the Tories and the SNP. Now, his speech comes 4 days after Nicola Sturgeon resigned as First Minister, and Sir Keir says he can bring the change Scotland needs to build a fairer, greener and more dynamic Britain.
If you place your faith in Labour, this is the change we offer to you, to Scotland and Britain. The case for a new Britain, the case for change, a country where working people succeed, aspiration is rewarded, public services raise you up, communities control their own destination, climate change is defeated, politics is a force for unity and for good.
Meanwhile, the SNP leadership contest has its first two candidates. The Scottish Health Secretary, Humza Yousaf, and former Minister Ash Regan announced their decision to run in the Sunday Mail. Other potential candidates to replace Nicola Sturgeon include the Finance Secretary Kate Forbes and Mary McCallan. Nominations close on Friday. The winner of the race will be announced at the end of March. British holidaymakers may face further disruption as Border Force workers continue their 4-day strike at French ports. Members of the public and commercial services walked out on Friday in a dispute over pay, pensions and job security. Delays of more than 6 hours were experienced at Calais yesterday, with disruption set to continue until tomorrow. Border Force says the military, civil servants and volunteers have stepped in to minimise the impact. Now, the US Secretary of State has warned China will face serious consequences if it provides lethal military aid to Russia. Anthony Blinken spoke to the country's top diplomat, Wang Yi. It was on the sidelines of the Global Security Conference in Munich. Now, the US believes Beijing is considering sending weapons and ammunition to Russia for the war in Ukraine, which China denies. The musical programme for the King's coronation has been revealed. An anthem written by composer Andrew Lloyd Webber is one of 12 new pieces to be played during the ceremony. Best known for musicals including Evita and Jesus Christ Superstar, Lloyd Webber says he's incredibly honoured to have been asked. Greek Orthodox music will also be played on the playlist, a personal request by King Charles as a late tribute to his father. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now it's back to Emily.
Good afternoon. Thank you for keeping me company this Sunday lunchtime. So today, I want to make sense of what is going on with our energy bills. Are we being taken for a ride, or, as with most things that matter, is the whole thing rather more complex? Now, you'd have to have been living under a rock, of course, not to have noticed the outrage, the fury over record profits posted by energy firm Centrica. That's the company that owns British Gas. 3.3 billion was even trending on Twitter for a few hours, perhaps even a couple of days, actually. Before that, we saw the same level of anger over Shell and BP's bumper profits. Is the outrage justified? Most of us, I'd hope, want to live in a country where excellence and good business is rewarded. But where's the line when it comes to making a profit and profiteering? We could say, well, surely it's a good thing. These companies are making profits in this country. They are, after all, taxed to high heaven. That money, you'd at least hope, will be used to prop up our ailing public services. But these companies have been accused of all sorts. War profiteering, purposefully keeping our energy bills high, and essentially being a total disgrace. Is that provocative nonsense, or is it actually morally wrong that these companies are profiting so much while some of us are struggling to pay our bills? At the same time, of course, we've woken up to the news that this morning the price of natural gas in Europe has fallen to its lowest level since before Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So we can all breathe a sigh of relief that we're not going to be facing any blackouts anytime soon, fingers crossed. But when will we see this reflected in our bills? I want to kick off the show today by looking beyond the instant reaction we've seen this week and the sensationalist headlines and dig a little deeper. I'm asking, is it right to say that energy companies are profiteering from our misery? Now, I'll be speaking to a range of guests on this today, but I want to hear from you. Please do email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at gbnews or at Carver Emily. Now, right, up first, I've got Clive Muffet, who is UK Energy Group founder and an energy policy analyst. Thank you very much, Clive. I think you seem to be someone who is, well, a top expert on everything energy related. Now, in my little intro monologue there, I think I touched upon what the media has been focusing on, and that has been these big, mega profits. So I'll ask you that first question, really. Is it fair to say that these companies are profiteering out of our misery?
I don't think profiteering is the right word. I think, yes, they are taking advantage of the market as a commercial company would. I think to some extent the blame really for keeping the companies, if you like, more liquid than perhaps they should be, has been probably with the government and Ofgem, who have been coming with a blanket support mechanism, which has basically underpinned the hedging costs of many of the energy suppliers. And we have to distinguish between energy supply here, retail, and we have to on wholesale. A lot of the profits that the British Gas have announced have come from its North Sea activities, from its wholesale activities, and from its wholesale trading activities, and a relatively small amount has come from retail. So I think the word profiteering is wrong. I think the issue you mentioned secondly about prices is good news. Yes, the wholesale gas price is 300% lower than it was last September, and all indications are that prices will continue to fall. So that when the cap is effectively, the support mechanism is adjusted in April, we should begin to see some reduction in both gas and electricity prices.
Now, you touched on this in your answer there, but can you break it down for people at home and for me as well? We saw across the headlines this week that British Gas is making these record profits, but it wasn't actually British Gas, was it? As you said, it was those producing the gas that were making the record profits. British Gas itself actually made a bit of a loss, or made less profit than it did the previous year.
Yes, exactly. It's Centrica rather than British Gas, yes. So, I mean, the issue really is, and as you said earlier in your introduction, I think it's 75% now that oil and gas companies are being taxed in the UK, which is very high. I think the fundamental problem in terms of affordability and security that the government have to address, and it's the government's responsibility here, not the suppliers primarily, is to address the issue about what's going to happen next. Where is the emphasis going to be put in the new department between security and net zero?
Well, that's a very interesting point, because some commentators have suggested that the two are mutually exclusive, net zero and energy security. Is that fair to say?
I wouldn't say mutually exclusive. I think that's extreme. I think I've always argued, and many others have for the last 10 years, that the government have played down. When we had the Department of Energy and Climate Change, we had the same almost two-headed monster with climate change winning out over security. That was back in 2010, 2013. And we haven't really... the danger is that in the current energy bill that's going through Parliament, it's currently in the Lords, there's very little in there which would underpin energy security in the foreseeable future. The fact is, leaving ideology aside about climate change versus non-climate change, the issue is one of accepting that natural gas has a critical role to play in both heat and power in the next 15 to 20 years. And what do we need to ensure that we have secure and affordable supplies of gas? And that requires more investment in storage, requires more investment in gas-to-power generation. And we basically, at the moment, the government is closing its ears to that particular argument for various reasons, and primarily because it doesn't want to be seen politically as doing anything which could be construed as suggesting that perhaps this 2050 target for net zero might not be attained.
Well, also, I think they're yes, as you say, I think they're worried about the green campaigners, the political backlash of being seen to invest in fossil fuels at this moment. But how does one articulate to the country that actually we are going to still need gas to fuel our transition in a way to greener technologies? We're still reliant on it, and if we don't make it here, if we don't drill it, if we don't allow supply to grow, we're just going to have to import it from, well, what can you say, dodgy regimes elsewhere.
We've always had to import it. We've been dependent in short-term LNG because the North Sea gas has gradually over the years begun to fall in terms of relative importance. But in terms of the public should realise, and it has done, that only a few weeks ago we have a situation where we had 10 gigawatt of installed wind capacity, and it was only contributing 3% of the electricity supply. And there was a National Grid actually turned around and admitted, after many months of refusing to admit, that the norm would become either involuntary or voluntary blackouts. And that is a situation that I think is not tenable. I think we have to do something to make sure that we don't have that situation, because at the end of the day, affordability and security go hand in hand. And I haven't discounted the fact that we might take longer than anticipated to reach a situation where we've decarbonised even further.
Now, Liam Halligan, our business and economics editor, who is very good at breaking down the complex detail and getting to the point, essentially, he wrote a column in the Telegraph recently where he talked about wholesale marginal pricing and how that's having a negative impact on our bills. Could you just explain in layman's terms what that is and how it affects the price that we pay?
Wholesale prices are set. We're effectively a price taker in the wholesale market, and prices set by worldwide supply and demand situation. So, for example, on the wholesale price at the moment, it has come down, as I said earlier, and but there is still expectation of what might happen in the Ukraine, as a result of which the forward wholesale price is still high, and businesses are complaining that they're having to pay slightly more because of the uncertainty that suppliers are having to face. And that's a temporary problem. It's part of the market. And I think there's nothing, I mean, the one way of mitigating that problem is to have more gas storage, and to mitigate its impact on electricity prices is to actually have more peak gas demand, gas power generation. And we're not vulnerable then to sudden wind or pressure changes which make intermittency in wind supply.
Well, there you go. I think sorry to interrupt you there.
It's a complex relationship between wholesale and retail.
Thank you very much indeed, Clive, for taking us through all of that complexity. That, of course, was Clive Muffet, UK Energy Group founder and energy policy analyst. Now, a lot of you have been getting in touch already. David said, what is the point of Ofgem? I thought their whole purpose was to regulate energy pricing. Well, we'll probably be talking quite a lot about Ofgem. It seems like perhaps they haven't been the most competent regulator, that's for sure. Steve says energy company profits have risen dramatically at the same time as domestic bills have risen. Surely profits can only come from an increase in consumption or increases in prices. Since the public have cut back consumption drastically due to energy costs, the assumption is energy companies have profited by increasing prices. Legally and morally, how can this be allowed to happen? Well, there Steve echoes very much a sentiment of much of the public when they look at their bills and wonder why on earth they are so high. Leo says, I'm not convinced that the excuse of war in Ukraine and economic sanctions against Russia are the sole reasons for the spikes in world fuel prices. Profiteering seems to be a theme of all war scenarios, be it beans, boots, cotton, arms, or presently fuels. Well, I think one can certainly say that the government should perhaps have planned for such a scenario, or at least made sure that we had enough energy in this country to keep us going so we weren't so hit. But I am hoping that we will see that wholesale cost coming down, hopefully we'll see that reflected in our bills sooner rather than later. I think it will be many months. Anyway, now we're going to be talking to Howard Cox, who is, of course, the founder of Fair Fuel UK. Now, Howard, I have seen you've got strong opinions on what you see as profiteering.
Yeah, I do see it as profiteering. And can I just make the point? Profit is good. There's no doubt about it. Profit is good. We've got to have profitable companies. But profiteering, none of those companies you've been speaking about, obviously I support the cost of motoring issues, taxation and the fuel supply issues for petrol and diesel owners. That's the issue I really follow. But the whole particular point I want to get across is that somewhere in the fuel supply chain, there is someone making a load of profit on the back of no skills whatsoever, purely fortunate issues regarding geopolitical issues, the war in Ukraine, oil prices. And we hear, and I was listening to your previous expert who actually talked a lot of sense, but the fact is that it's supply and demand. Well, that's fine. Supply and demand, I understand that. No problems at all. But please, can we have some transparency and honesty of how pump prices and how gas prices and electricity prices are arrived at? Because they are completely and utterly opaque.
Well, I think this is the issue. It's not that the energy firms can simply just decide how much they charge for this. It's all done by this regulator that seems to be a bit of a mess. And fundamentally, it looks like the energy market needs to be completely reformed, taken apart and put back together. It can't be that we're constantly given the highest price regardless of where the energy comes from. That seems to be the problem. I mean, people you talk to, what is their attitude, everyday attitude? Because some people see this as, great, you know, we have companies that are doing brilliantly in this country. Their tax will go to fund our public services. That's a good thing. But it does seem like the majority of people in this country are fuming.
Absolutely. I've got 1.7 million supporters, you know, drivers of diesel and petrol cars predominantly, and the haulage industry and people like that. And when you go down the road and you see one Shell garage charging one price, you go about 2 or 3 miles down the road, another Shell garage charging 10p less. What drivers are saying, how does that happen? What is happening? Because you do not see a difference between the price of a pint of milk in one Sainsbury's to another Sainsbury's. What I'm asking for, and I'm hoping in the budget coming up on March the 15th, and I think Jeremy Hunt will say something, I'm calling for a body called Pump Watch. I want to see some sort of honesty and transparency and fairness in how pump prices arrive.
I think that's, Howard, I think that's a good point, although I would say the price of your sandwich can differ quite remarkably depending on which Tesco you go to, or which Tesco Express, Tesco Extra, whatever.
Well, that's great. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm talking about essential resources like gas, electricity, petrol and diesel. People have no choice but to use these things. And when we're seeing that, you know, we're under the threat, as you know, of a fuel duty rise of 12p coming in the March budget, potentially 14.4p with VAT on top. And that's another story you can talk about in another time. But simply, people, you ask the question, what are people saying to me? They just want to know how prices arrived at. And maybe if they actually educated us on this situation and they produced reasonable explanations for this, then there wouldn't be such much of an emotive outcry.
Well, it's like these things are made so complicated so that we don't understand. If you look at the energy market, it takes a genius to understand all the different parts. I'm getting there. Happily, I'm learning from the experts, but it's extremely complicated stuff, and people don't understand why their bill is the way it is. They don't understand all the different costs that are added to their bills, all the different green levies, all the standing charges, etc., etc. It is a bit of a minefield. Now, I want to get on to something a little bit different, but relevant in a way, ULEZ. Now, you are a campaigner against ULEZ. Now, I've seen today some good news, perhaps, that ministers and officials are drawing up plans to potentially block Sadiq Khan's expansion of the ULEZ zone, that's the low emissions zone, to Greater London.
Well, I'm cautiously welcoming what's going to happen, but I wrote to Mark Harper, the Transport Minister, back in November, the day after that Sadiq Khan decided to railroad the public consultation and go against the 2 out of 3 who were against the extension, and he introduced it in August. And he also manipulated that public consultation process. He also took out 5,000 of Fair Fuel UK supporters, my campaign supporters, from it. He manipulated it. This is totally dishonest. But the pressure we put onto, and now we've got 5 councils, 5 boroughs around Greater London who are thinking of or actually going ahead with a judicial review. He is under a huge amount of pressure. And I should imagine that it'll end up in the courts, say. But one of the things I'm worried about is the Tories might just let him wallow in his own downfall as such, and they can come in and rescue at the end. What people want is not to have that ultra-low emission zone extension implemented. That's a simple thing to do, and it'd be terribly, I think, disingenuous if they didn't do something about it. And Rishi Sunak can overturn that decision.
Well, yes, and I wrote a column, I think, just a few days ago on this, and how one of their consultations found that 75% of people in Greater London didn't want it, didn't want this ULEZ. It's totally undemocratic. But I do wonder why politicians even bother with these public consultations, whether it comes to changing street names or whether it comes to more important things like ULEZ expansion. They just seem to be ignored, and then the policy is rubber-stamped anyway.
Emily, you hit the nail right on the head. What is a public consultation? Isn't it? It includes the public. You consult with them. They don't seem to go together in the eyes of, not backbench MPs, because I've got something like 60 MPs who've written to the business minister, the transport minister, and to Jeremy Hunt to say that we must have this pump watch scheme, for example. And I think something will happen, but it's taken a lot of lobbying. And with the ULEZ situation, we've had to have thousands and thousands of people. I'm apolitical, but I'm working quite hard with Conservative people in the General Assembly in London, and they are livid beyond this because he was dishonest. And I also spoke to Sir Keir Starmer and said, why have you not suspended a dishonest politician? You had a go at Nadim Zahawi being dishonest with his taxes. Why are you not having a go and suspending Sadiq Khan from actually giving you, putting your party into disrepute?
Well, there you go. Thank you very much indeed for joining us this afternoon. Howard Cox, founder of Fairfuel UK, the hardest working campaigner in the world of fuel, I'd say. Now, we're going to be moving on, but please do let me know what you make of what Howard was saying there, particularly on the ULEZ, actually. Now, when the residents of the small Cornish town of Lostwithiel, I think that's how you say it, found out their local surgery was struggling to recruit a new GP, they took matters into their own hands and made a recruitment music video. GB News reporter Jeff Moody went to find out whether it worked.
We've got a surgery that's needing you. We've got money if you want brass. We've lots of bills.
The people of Lostwithiel are proud of their GP surgery, and it's easy to see why.
The atmosphere here is lovely. It's a really nice, happy, friendly place to work. Everybody's really supportive, and it's probably the nicest place that I've worked.
It's been absolutely first class. The idea that you can have a problem in the morning and get a response from the doctors, at least in the afternoon, is a bit unique from what I'm being told. We certainly wouldn't want to lose that.
Lostwithiel medical practice is superb. So much so that it's been voted the top practice in Cornwall and the 24th in the country. Now that is some achievement for a start.
But all that's under threat. One of the practice's 2 GPs is retiring at the end of March, and despite advertising far and wide, the Cornish town has had no interest whatsoever.
There's national shortages, we know that. Every advert looks the same in a journal, and Lostwithiel's not going to stand out. They all say they're the best at this and the best at that, but actually we are the best practice in Cornwall. We're outstanding with CQC, so we should stand out, but we don't. So I just think there's too many vacancies.
And so the community got together to create their own job advert in song.
It was so easy to get people involved. Nobody, absolutely nobody said no. We got some of the community groups involved, and then for the last shot, the big one, we had a cherry picker on the field behind me, and we just did a big shout out to the town. I reckon we had about 500 people in that film in the end. I mean, Emma wrote the lyrics. We had somebody else who's a great musician in town do the backing track. We had another person from the town do the sound engineering, and a lovely Cornish filmmaker put it together. So really it is a whole community effort.
And it's paying off. The video has sparked interest from across the globe. They've had media responses from Germany and New York. And already GPs are trekking down to Cornwall for a look around. It won't be long, they hope, before Lost Withiel has its full complement of GPs once again. Jeff Moody, GB News.
Now that is community spirit, if ever I saw it. You're of course watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends with me, Emily Carver. Standing in for the man himself, lots more coming up on today's show, including more strike action tomorrow. Of course, as ambulance workers with the GMB and Unite unions take to the picket lines, we'll be getting the very latest on which areas will be affected. But first, we're going to have a quick look at the weather.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vaughtry here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Sunday is set to be another mild day for all of us, but exactly how it feels will vary across the country. It's that southwesterly flow of air feeding in from the Atlantic that's bringing us the mild weather, but areas in the south have high pressure in charge, keeping things fairly settled. But further to the north, we do have some frontal systems pushing their way across Scotland, so here it's going to be a bit of a wetter day, some heavier bursts of rain possible. A few patches of drizzle, maybe for Northern Ireland, parts of northern England, but generally the further south you are, it will stay drier, and actually some sunny intervals developing across parts of Wales and into southern areas of England. And when we get that sunshine, temperatures will be climbing towards highs of 15 degrees Celsius, quite mild for the time of year. It will still be mild further north, but we're going to see the breeze strengthening, and that will continue into this evening, turning really quite gusty, severe gales for a time across parts of Scotland, maybe up to 70-mile-an-hour gusts. This band of rain then pushing its way across parts of Scotland as well. A few spots of drizzle further south, the cloud tending to build a bit more throughout the night. But underneath that cloud, the vast majority of us will be staying frost-free once again, and it will be another mild night. Throughout Monday, that band of rain in the north is going to stall a bit across parts of Argyll and Bute in towards Stirling, so it could be a fairly damp day here. To the north of that, actually some decent sunny intervals, but remaining rather windy across Shetland. Further to the south, again, it will be a relatively cloudy day, some spats and spits of spots of drizzle possible, but going to be another mild one. 16 degrees is certainly possible. We'll hold on to the cloud for England, Wales, Northern Ireland throughout Monday evening. That band of rain in the north, though, will just begin to shift its way further towards parts of Lewis and Harrison into the Highlands. It will be another mild day on Tuesday, but rain later on in the day will signal a slight change for the middle part of the week, and we will start to see those temperatures falling a bit closer to average for the time of year. Bye-bye.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It is 1:32. I am Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. Good afternoon to you. A Cabinet Minister says Boris Johnson's intervention on the Northern Ireland Protocol is not unhelpful. Rishi Sunak and the European Commission presidents issued a joint statement yesterday saying they'd made very good progress on fixing issues with the contentious post-Brexit trade arrangement. Well, Mr Johnson's warned that dropping the protocol bill, which gives the UK the right to ignore EU rules, would be a great mistake. The Leader of the House of Commons, Penny Mordaunt, says Mr Johnson's intervention highlights the bill's function as a bargaining chip.
It's helpful to remind the EU that we have the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill. It's helpful to remind them what those expectations are. But I would also just say that, look, there are encouraging signs. There is, people are saying there's a lot more to do, but progress is being made.
Sir Keir Starmer says he wants to be the Prime Minister for the UK and not just of the UK. Addressing the Scottish Labour conference in Edinburgh, he urged voters to take another look at the party, saying the tide is turning on the Tories and the SNP. His speech comes 4 days after Nicola Sturgeon resigned as First Minister. Meanwhile, the SNP leadership contest has its first two candidates. Scottish Health Secretary Humza Yousaf and the former Minister Ash Regan have announced their decision to run in the Sunday Mail earlier. Other potential candidates to replace Nicola Sturgeon include the Finance Secretary Kate Forbes and Mary McCallan. Nominations close on Friday. The winner will be announced on the 27th of March. TV online and DAB Plus Radio, this is GB News. Now, it is back to Emily.
Right, I'm sure some of you at home have a little bit of strikes fatigue, but there are more to come. Tomorrow, GMB and Unite ambulance workers are due to strike in their ongoing dispute over staffing and pay. More than 10,000 GMB members from several ambulance services, including South West, Yorkshire and South Central and North West, will take part in the strikes. Other staff walking out include emergency care assistants, call handlers and paramedics. Meanwhile, Unite will be joined by Alan in just a moment. Meanwhile, Unite members working for ambulance trusts will be striking in the East Midlands, North East and Wales. This all comes ahead of the Royal College of Nurses strike at the start of March, which will be their biggest strike so far. Now, you've been getting in touch on energy firm profits. Here are just a few of your thoughts coming through. Dave says, we are being ripped off for gas and electric, and where has the 25% green energy levy we are paying gone when all the wind farms are owned by foreign companies? It does seem like these sneaky little levies are very much pushing up our bills. I do wonder whether you think net zero is to blame, or at least partially to blame, for the fact that we're spending so much on our energy bills, that we're being charged so much on our energy bills. Bernard says the energy companies are profiteering and Sunak was in collusion with them when he was Chancellor. Every penny of financial aid given to the public has gone straight to the energy companies, and inflation was caused by energy costs going up. They could have left prices as they were and the government could have subsidised the wholesale cost of energy. And Jason's also got in touch. He says these companies need to be pulled into line. They are crippling the people of the country with pure greed. Help us, please, the government of this country. Well, I mean, you could say that the government is very much spending a lot of our money, a lot of taxpayers' money, which of course is not their money, on subsidising our bills in one way or another through cost of living payments, etc., etc. But crucially, what they need to do, in my view, is get supply up. That's the only way to bring down those prices long term, and it seems they're adverse to doing anything that could be seen as going against the net zero campaign, whether that's fracking or other things. Please do keep your views coming in, and remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're at GB News. Now back to strikes. To find out how this will impact us tomorrow, I am joined by Alan Jones, who is the industrial correspondent at PA Media. Thank you very much indeed for joining us this afternoon, Alan. Now, I think I said at the top, I think a lot of us have a bit of strike fatigue, but we're heading for some big ones.
Oh, there's no question. I mean, this has been the most amazing several months of strikes. Some massive, massive turning points, I thought, anyway, last year with nurses going on strike, ambulance workers going on strike, the biggest single one day of strikes last month. But you're right, in the next few weeks, we're going to see some very, very, very serious strikes. So the Royal College of Nursing, as you've mentioned there, they've announced 2 days of strikes, 48 hours strikes. That's the first. That'll be the longest strike, involving the most nurses, involving the most NHS trusts, 1st and 2nd of March. And then tomorrow is another very big day, because the British Medical Association will tomorrow be announcing the results of a ballot amongst about 45,000 junior doctors in England for strikes over pay. All the indications are that there's going to be a huge vote in favour of strikes, and the BMA have already said if that's the case, they're going to have a 3-day strike sometime in March. So already we're looking at March being one of the biggest months of several months of disruption.
Now, we know unions like the RMT continue to refuse to accept the government's offer. I don't think they even put it to their members. They were that horrified by what the government was suggesting for them. In terms of nurses and ambulance workers and NHS workers in general, there is a lot more public support, isn't there? Do you think the government or the unions, who's going to budge first?
Yeah, it's been, it's crazy to talk about nurses having to budge, or the government having to budge. It's ridiculous. It's got to this level, to be honest. In terms of public support, the Royal College of Nursing have revealed today that they've had £250,000 donated to them by members of the public to help nurses when they're on strike, which is helping the RCN give more strike pay the next time there are strikes. So there's no question public support is holding up. In fact, I think it's increasing. All the evidence we see from opinion polls on the picket lines, as you've seen there, you go to any picket line on March the 1st and 2nd, I guarantee everyone passing that picket line, every member of the public will be supporting them. And now they're actually supporting them financially as well. So, if the government continues with this line of it can't afford to give the nurses any more pay, can't afford to give ambulance workers any more pay, civil servants, teachers, we're just going to see these strikes continue, virtually till the next general election, actually, I think, the way it's going.
But some might also say, just to give a little balance on that, some might also say if they do give in to the demands of these unions, then they will continue to have to do so, as you said, across the public sector. But then, if they win this time, then why not try again? Why not try again? And we could be stuck in a situation where the government is constantly having to raise wages across the public sector, which, of course, everyone has to pay for.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a mess. There's no question. We've got to the stage now where it's very difficult to see a way out of this. But, you look at what's happening in Wales and Scotland. The governments in Wales and Scotland have found more money to offer the nurses and the teachers. I mean, the disputes aren't resolved there by any means, but they're certainly on the way to being resolved. So, the unions are saying if they can do it, why can't the Westminster government do it? And at the very least, the unions are saying there should be some kind of negotiations going on. There's hardly any talks being held over these disputes at all. The Royal College of Nursing haven't met the Health Secretary for a month, even though they're in the middle of the biggest outbreak of strikes by nurses ever. So it does seem incredible, I think, that there aren't proper negotiations going on.
And Alan, just quickly, very lastly, do you have any intel on whether the government is going to offer something different to a pay rise? Could it be that they offer a, surprise one-off payment?
Do you know what? Ever since these disputes started, every month or so, there are reports, rumours, suggestions, leaks that the government is going to do exactly that, offer a one-off payment or bring forward next year's pay rise. I mean, there's not much time left now because next year's pay rise is meant to start in April. But these are always unconfirmed rumours. Nothing has ever been put on the table, which is it's just making it worse. I'm not getting, the unions want to sit down and negotiate an end to all of this. It's disruptive for them and their members as well. So if there is a suggestion of a one-off payment or bringing forward a pay deal, the unions would love to sit down and negotiate with the government about it. They really would.
Well, you know what, Alan? I think that we need to look again at the pensions because they are incredibly generous, and perhaps people could get a bit more upfront pay if they were to forego some of that generous pension that people, of course, in the private sector don't tend to get. But anyway, thank you very much indeed for joining us this afternoon. That's Alan Jones, industrial correspondent at PA Media, talking us through those trade union strikes, those union strikes across the NHS, really. I'd like to know what you think. I think it was pretty clear where Alan stands on that. He's definitely supporting the nurses. Are you? Let me know. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends with me, Emily Carver. Plenty more to come still this afternoon, including what is expected to be one of the biggest compensation claims in UK legal history is being launched over fees charged to businesses on their energy bills. Lawyers are asking the court to give firms their money back, plus interest, as part of a broader campaign against unlawful fees and what they call stealth taxes. More on that after this short break. Stay tuned.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like.
Absolutely.
On Dubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Yes, welcome back. I'm Emily Carver, standing in for Alastair Stewart on GB News this afternoon. Now, I've got Catherine Forster, our political correspondent, political reporter, here in the studio with me. I believe we've had an update on the Nicola Bulley case.
Yes, there is now a huge police search going on close to, within a mile, it's reported, of where Nicola Bulley disappeared back in January the 27th, three and a half weeks ago. There's been no breakthroughs as such. Could this be the breakthrough that the family have been waiting for? It's reported that 2 walkers spotted something and raised an alert. Divers have been sent to the scene. All the roads have been cordoned off. And obviously we will wait to see what develops. But obviously a very worrying time for the family.
Yes, of course. And this is an area that they hadn't yet explored, hadn't yet searched. Do we know that?
It's unclear.
It's unclear.
I understand it's being reported that it's less than a mile from where she was last seen. Now, of course, the river, the surroundings were extensively searched, weren't they, over 3.5 weeks? And there was, there's been huge amounts of speculation, not all of it helpful, but there was speculation that perhaps she'd fallen in the river, that potentially she might have gone out to sea. Of course, the family were clinging desperately to thinking hopefully she wasn't in the river, hopefully she'd gone somewhere, hopefully she would be OK. Now, it's important to say we don't know what they will find, if anything, but certainly walkers have seen something and the police taking this very seriously.
Well, let's hope it's good news and this will improve the investigation a lot. Thank you very much for bringing us that breaking news there on the Nicola Bulley case. That was Catherine Forster, our political reporter there. Now, moving on to an interesting one, really. What is expected to be one of the biggest compensation claims in UK legal history is being launched on behalf of hundreds of thousands of UK businesses. The class action aims to recoup multi-billions in fees that small and large businesses incurred after being overcharged on fees for transactions because of MasterCard and Visa rules. This could perhaps have affected you if you're a business owner or a business person. The action claims that anti-competitive and unlawful fees have been charged on transactions since 2017 and are still being charged now. We're going to find out a bit more about this. I am joined by Ryan Dunleavy, partner at Harcus Parker. Now, you're leading this, are you not?
Yes, well, Harcus Parker is. I'm part of a team. Yes. So
tell me, what's going on?
Effectively, it's a massive bribery case. So we've discovered that energy suppliers are giving kickbacks to energy brokers who are supposed to be representing their clients who are non-domestic consumers, so which are companies, schools, faith groups, you name it, pretty much anyone who's not a household business or, a household or a business under 10 staff members. So it's absolutely massive. There are 1,600 brokers in the country. We're not saying that they've all done this, but it seems to be endemic that the broker's supposed to be acting on behalf of the business to get the best energy deal that they can, but instead they're going with deals that give them kickbacks from the energy suppliers that aren't disclosed to our clients. So it's a massive case.
Is this something that some people will not have noticed was happening? How did you catch wind of it?
We've caught wind of it because of doing investigations ourselves. I mean, some of that's fairly sensitive, so I can't go into details. But yes, absolutely, clients won't realise because it's simply not on their invoices from their suppliers. And they don't realise quite how much it is. So energy, for instance, is retailing at about 50p per kilowatt hour for these companies, and 10p of that can be going in kickbacks to the brokers throughout the lifespan of the contract that they simply don't know about.
So how much could they be losing? I mean, presumably you have cases where it's going into the hundreds of thousands, or is it just £100 here and there? How much is it?
No, absolutely, very good point. So it depends on the size of the business and how much electricity it consumes. So most will probably be tens of thousands of pounds. We can go back 6 years. But some reach into up to £1 million. So it depends on the particular consumer. We've got, for instance, a brewery that consumed an awful lot of electricity and used a broker to get its contract, and it's certainly claiming for hundreds of thousands of pounds.
Now, where's Ofgem in all of this? Is this actually an illegal practice? Is there not really a law there that's against this? What's Ofgem's view?
No, very good question. Ofgem last year regulated micro businesses, so businesses with fewer than 10 staff, which I mentioned before, weren't covered, unless it was before last year. So we do go back 6 years. So with those businesses, the brokers have to disclose and the suppliers have to disclose exactly how much is being paid in kickbacks by the suppliers to the brokers who are supposed to be acting for the customer. But over 10 staff members, a business is simply vulnerable to what's often a feeding frenzy of brokers, sort of circling around it to try to get the contract, thinking that broker is acting in their best interest, but it's completely unregulated. And we urge Ofcom.
Another regulator.
Another regulator. we urge Ofsted to.
Not sure Ofsted would be much help. Anyway, Ofgem.
We urge Ofgem to regulate this like they have done with micro businesses, because it's simply completely unregulated at the moment.
Well, it does seem utterly unfair if people are paying huge amounts in this way, firstly, without potentially knowing about it, and secondly, at such a high rate. It does seem rather sneaky. What could the regulator actually do? You say they should regulate this more. But what does that actually mean?
Well, they can impose sanctions, so they can fine, they can investigate. So they should definitely investigate the situation and then impose regulations that have to be followed. Otherwise, there can be sanctions. And also with these micro businesses, what they did was they said that they had to go through what's called an alternative dispute resolution process, so that effectively there was a mechanism in place that was signed up for people to get redress, and they required the energy suppliers to put on the invoices that they were giving these kickbacks of X amount. Because some people might not mind paying a certain amount to a broker if it's still the best deal, but they want to know what they're paying for rather than simply have money bolted on.
Presumably, you're the legal firm behind this, so you'll be getting a little bit of a kickback if you do well with this legal action, presumably from your clients. A nice little fee.
It's a commercial. We are a commercial enterprise. It's a no-win, no-fee case, so we're working on the basis that we've taken out financing to do this, and if we lose, then we effectively, we've lost all our time and energy and money that we've put into it. And if we win, then we take a percentage of the compensation that's paid.
Well, it's probably a good time to be going after the energy companies, actually, in bad practice, seeing as they seem to be constantly in bad press. So there you go. It might be a good time. Thank you very much indeed for joining me today, Ryan Dunleavy, partner at Harkus Parker. Thank you for coming into the studio.
Thanks, Emily.
Now, moving on, we are going to be talking about showbiz. Moving on to showbiz, the Bafta Film Awards take place tonight in London's Royal Festival Hall and promise to showcase the best of the world of cinema. Nominees include the Netflix production All Quiet on the Western Front. Fantastic film, that's very good indeed. I'd recommend it. It's racked up 14 nominations in total, including Best Film and Best Direction. The Irish drama, The Banshees of Inisherin, I haven't seen that one, has also received several nominations, including Best Film. But will the favourites reign supreme, or will there be a few unexpected surprises among the winners? I'm delighted to say that I am joined by showbiz correspondent Ellie Phillips, back from her honeymoon. Thank you very much for coming into the studio. You look fabulous, as always. So tell me, what should we be excited about?
So tonight's actually really interesting because, like you said, the ceremony's moved, so it's at the Royal Festival Hall. It's the first time it's been held there, and it's going to be Richard E. Grant hosting with Alison Hammond as a backstage host. So that's a brand new duo, so that'll be exciting to see because he's got really dry humour and she is obviously very witty, very funny. So hopefully that will be interesting to see. There are 25 categories. Leading the nominees are, with 14 nods, is All Quiet on the Western Front, which is incredible, and it's a Netflix show. That's how you can watch it. So streamers are doing really well this year. That one's up for 14, but it's not expected to do well overall, considering it's the most nominated. After that, Everything Everywhere All at Once, that's up for 10 awards. And the Banshees of Inisherin, when you mentioned before, that's also up for 10 awards. That's actually going to do really well, according to the bookies. I think they're very, very likely to win. I think Colin Farrell is going to win Best Actor. He won at the Golden Globes recently as well, and he is by far the odds-on favourite to win that. I mean,
I love this. Have you ever placed a bet on an award?
I really should start doing that.
Yeah, why not? You probably know enough.
To be honest, I should have done, because last year I was convinced that Coda was going to win the Oscar, and it did. And I knew it was going to do it. And because as soon as I watched it, I was like, there's no way this can't win. But interestingly, this year, I think, so if you've not seen The Banshees of Inisherin, it's what we would call an Oscar film. It's not light-hearted. You don't leave feeling fun, but the acting is incredible. And in fact, two actors from it are also up for supporting actor, and it's likely as well that supporting actress will also go to that film as well. So it's going to do really, really well. It's deservedly so, because the acting is phenomenal in it. In other categories, the big ones, leading actress is probably going to go to Kate Blanchett.
So we do still have gender roles?
We do have gender roles. Yeah, the Bafta Film Award still has gender roles. So Colin Farrell's likely to win Best Actor, which, I think, again, is really well-deserved. But then Austin Butler won the Golden Globe. He's also up for it, but I don't think he's going to win it. I think the Baftas want to see it go to, someone Irish and kind of keep it Great Britain and Ireland. As well as that, so like I said, Kate Blanchett, she's up for it. Viola Davis, she's also up for Best Actress. Anna de Armas for Blonde. Emma Thompson, good luck to you. Leo Grand. Michelle Yeoh. So Michelle Yeoh is the lead actress in Everything Everywhere All at Once. She also won the Golden Globe because at the Golden Globes, they have two different leading actress categories. So she is kind of coming up in the Booker's kind of, odds, but I still think it's going to go to Cate Blanchett there as well. Like I said, for supporting actress, Kerry Condon from The Banshees of Inisherin, she is phenomenal, and I really think she's going to get
Ellie,
that.
I don't know who half these people are.
Oh,
I'm
she's
so
amazing.
bad. I hope people at home know who you're talking about, because Cate Blanchett, yes. Emma Thompson, yes. The rest.
Colin Farrell? You don't know Colin Farrell?
Oh, Colin Farrell,
OK,
no,
I
yes.
was about to say, I need to have a word with you after. It's going to sit you down and make you to watch some films. But Angela Bassett, she's also up for supporting actress, and she won it for Wakanda Forever. She won the Golden Globe.
OK.
She's up for it.
Now, that is all we have time for, Ellie. But thank you very much for taking us through all of that. That was really great. I will be watching, perhaps, this evening. I'll see. I like the drama that comes out of it. Anyway, thank you very much indeed. That was showbiz correspondent Ellie Phillips with us, pretty in pink. Now, you're with Emily Carver, of course, standing in for Alastair Stewart on GB News. We've got lots more coming up this afternoon, including we'll be talking about trust in the police following the handling of the Nicola Bulley case. We'll also have all the latest from Downing Street with our political reporter, who will be joining me again live. But first, let's have a break.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not
believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Emily Carver, standing in for Alastair Stewart, and we're into the last hour of the programme. I'll be keeping you company, of course, on TV and radio this Sunday lunchtime. Plenty more still to come this afternoon. So, Lancashire Police have, of course, received widespread criticism for their handling of the Nicola Bulley case. Crime is up, including knife crime, gun crime even is up in London. We'll be discussing how do we rebuild trust in the police. Also, we'll be getting all the latest political news from today's front pages. But first, let's get the latest news with Aaron Armstrong.
Good afternoon, it's 2:02. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom, and we'll start with some breaking news which you may just have heard. Lancashire police, who are searching for the missing mother of two, Nicola Bulley, have cordoned off a large area near the River Wyre. Now, Nicola disappeared just over 3 weeks ago while she was walking her dog in the village of St Michael's on Wyre. Police have said their main hypothesis to this point is that she fell into the water, but there has been increased police activity in the last hour. Helicopters are circling the area, and we will bring you more on this story as it develops. Now, a Cabinet Minister says Boris Johnson's intervention on the Northern Ireland Protocol is not unhelpful because there's still plenty of work to be done. Mr Johnson's warning, scrapping the bill would be a great mistake. It comes just a day after Rishi Sunak and the European Commission President said they'd made very good progress on fixing problems with the post-Brexit trading arrangements. Now, the protocol bill introduced under Mr Johnson gives the UK the right to ignore EU rules, and the Leader of the House of Commons, Penny Mordaunt, believe that gives the government a stronger bargaining position.
I think, it's helpful to remind the EU that we have the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill. It's helpful to remind them what those expectations are. But I would also just say that, look, there are encouraging signs. There is, people are saying there's a lot more to do, but progress is being made.
Political commentator Dr John Coulter, though, says Mr Johnson's intervention on Brexit, his first since leaving office, could have serious ramifications.
Solving the protocol deal in Northern Ireland will guarantee the security of the peace process for, I would say, the next generation. Now, what Boris has done is really thrown a Trojan horse into the political negotiations here. Originally, the protocol was always seen as the European Union punishing the UK for daring to democratically vote to leave the European Union. So we've got to get a solution to the protocol.
Sir Keir Starmer says he wants to be the Prime Minister for the UK and not just of the UK. Addressing the Scottish Labour conference in Edinburgh, he urged voters to take another look at his party, saying the tide is turning on the Tories and the SNP. Sir Keir's speech comes 4 days after Nicola Sturgeon resigned as First Minister. Sir Keir says he can bring the change Scotland needs to build a fairer, greener and more dynamic Britain.
If you place your faith in Labour, this is the change we offer to you, to Scotland and Britain. The case for a new Britain, the case for change. A country where working people succeed, aspiration is rewarded, public services raise you up, communities control their own destination, climate change is defeated, politics is a force for unity and for good.
Meanwhile, the SNP leadership contest has its first two candidates. The Scottish Health Secretary Humza Yousaf and former Minister Ash Regan announced their decision to run in the Sunday Mail. Other potential candidates to replace Nicola Sturgeon include the Finance Secretary Kate Forbes and Mary McCallan. Nominations close on Friday and the winner of the race will be announced at the end of March. The US Secretary of State has warned China will face serious consequences if it provides lethal military aid to Russia. Anthony Blinken spoke to the country's top diplomat, Wang Yi, on the sidelines of the Global Security Conference in Munich. The US believes Beijing is considering sending weapons and ammunition to Russia for the war in Ukraine. China denies that. The musical programme for the King's coronation has been revealed. An anthem written by composer Andrew Lloyd Webber is one of the 12 pieces to be played during the ceremony. Best known for the musicals, including Evita and Jesus Christ Superstar, he is said to be incredibly honoured to have been asked. Greek Orthodox music will also be on the playlist as a personal request by King Charles as a tribute to his late father. This is GB News. More as it happens. Now let's get back to Emily.
Welcome back. It's been quite a momentous week in politics for all of the UK's nations, with Nicola Sturgeon stepping down as First Minister, Keir Starmer at the Scottish Labour Party conference, the ongoing Northern Ireland Protocol talks, and the Prime Minister pledging to step up support for Ukraine. Here to take us through the week's events and look forward, perhaps, is GB News political reporter Catherine Forster. Catherine, I want to get stuck into Boris Johnson first, because it does seem like there's been some sensationalist headlines about his intervention. Here, I'm reading, Rishi Sunak is on a collision course with Boris Johnson over Brexit. Is that a bit of hyperbole?
I don't know that it is really, because Boris Johnson's obviously a huge figure still, and Rishi Sunak might wish that he and Liz Truss would fade gently and discreetly into the background, but it's become very clear over the last couple of weeks that neither of them has any intention of doing so. And so Boris Johnson has made it known that he thinks it would be a huge mistake for the UK to drop the Northern Irish Protocol bill that's currently pretty much stalled. It's been paused, basically, by Rishi Sunak in the House of Lords, because he feels that it gives us leverage over the EU and sends a message to them that if they don't give us a better deal on the protocol, that we could, in fact, pull the plug on parts of it. I'm not sure that it's terribly helpful in that Rishi Sunak wants to be seen as the man in charge with the mandate to get things done. But as Penny Mordaunt was saying, she thinks that message is worth repeating to the EU. Many people believe that the EU respond to a little bit of a stick, but that hasn't been Rishi Sunak's approach so far. And the Brexit deal that we thought maybe was going to be done on Friday and possibly presented to Cabinet on Tuesday, looks like there's still quite a way to go on that.
Yes, I mean, looking at all the Sunday papers for weeks, there's been suggestions that we're only, a few days away from getting this excellent deal. But Boris Johnson has been talking to the DUP and others to say that you can't give in to any compromise on the Northern Ireland Protocol. Does Boris Johnson have more support in the Conservative Party than Rishi Sunak does on this?
I don't know that he's got more support, but certainly he's got enough support to make things difficult. There's going to be plenty of members of the European Research Group that may be unhappy if the European Court of Justice still has a role and basically is the ultimate arbiter in Northern Ireland. That is going to go down very badly with the ERG and obviously with the Democratic Unionist Party as well. So now, Rishi Sunak has been talking to Ursula von der Leyen of the EU. They've been talking about good progress. They're hoping, I think Rishi Sunak's hoping that in having talked to the DUP, he can then go back to the EU and say, we've nearly got this over the line, you just need to give us a little bit more. But it's difficult to see the EU really saying, OK, the ECJ can have nothing to do with Northern Ireland. So how they reach a compromise is hard to see. But at the same time, unless they do, there is no functioning government in Northern Ireland, and that's having a really negative effect on the people. And lots of people in Northern Ireland just want this to be settled.
Well, they've been in a state of almost limbo, haven't they, really, in terms of government over there. Well, we'll see what happens, but it does seem like whatever is agreed, there will always be someone who picks through the details, finds something they do not like. And I do think the rest of us, perhaps I'm wrong on this, but I think a lot of us have a bit of Brexit fatigue and just want something to work properly, or as we've been told it should. Now, something else has been going on. Of course, Keir Starmer has been at the Scottish Labour conference. He was saying that the Labour Party will under no circumstances power share with the SNP.
Yes, and it looks very much at the moment, if the polls are to be believed, obviously lots can change, we're maybe a year and a half out from a general election, that he absolutely won't need to. Now, the speech that he's given was very strong on, passion. He's got a spring in his step, fairly light on detail, but he's basically saying, have another look at Labour. And, of course, this is a massive opportunity for Labour. Now that Nicola Sturgeon has unexpectedly said that she's resigning as leader of the SNP, the future of the SNP in terms of getting that independence referendum, who's going to lead them, it's all in flux. But it hasn't been good, certainly for the independence movement in the short term at least. And Labour are hoping that there's a real chance for them, potentially. Labour, of course, and Scotland, it used to be their big stronghold.
Yeah.
They possibly might be able to take back significant numbers of seats at the next general election. So really good news for them and good news for the union, probably. But of course, we don't know who's going to be elected. We don't know what direction the SNP will go in. But lots going on and a huge week. I mean, it's recess week, so you tend to think that nothing happens politically in recess week.
It's no rest for the wicked, apparently. But it does look like the Labour Party are going to be soaking up votes from those dissatisfied with both the SNP and the Conservatives. They are going to be the main beneficiaries so far. Anyway, thank you very much indeed for joining us to take us through the very latest from Westminster and also from Scotland. Ollie Rood from Northern Ireland, all over the UK. Thank you very much indeed, Catherine. Now, we are going to be moving on to the second of our big questions of today. We talked about energy profits, whether energy companies are profiteering. Now we're going to be talking about trust in the police. I want to get to the heart of what's going wrong when it comes to policing crime in this country. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that parts of this country can feel lawless. From my own experience, walking through parts of our capital at night time, it can feel like the Wild West. Men loitering in balaclavas, hoodies at street corners, fights breaking out outside fast food shops. The fear of being mugged or worse is very real, I'd say. The stats do back this up. We've seen a record number of fatal stabbings in the past year. We're also seeing firearm offences on a meteoric rise. Sorry, I hope I'm not ruining your Sunday lunch with all this, but it's what's happening. A report by the Daily Mail found that gun crime in England and Wales has almost doubled in 1 year. In London, it's increased by 2,533%. That sounds pretty shocking with that kind of percentage increase. These figures is shocking indeed, and that's before we get on to robberies and sexual offences and other crimes. In the past week or so, we've seen huge amounts of vitriol towards the police, not least over the way the Nicola Bulley case has been handled or mishandled by Lancashire police. There's also the scandal-ridden Met that failed to protect women from the evil crimes perpetrated by serving police officers David Carrick and Wayne Couzens, to name a couple. I want to know what you think is going wrong when it comes to policing crime in this country, and crucially, what needs to be done to restore trust in what is an essential service. I'll be speaking to two very different guests on this today, but I want to hear from you too. Please do email me at gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at carveremily@gbnews. I am joined now by former police detective Chief Inspector Peter Kirkham. Peter, I'm not sure if you were listening just then, but I did paint a rather bleak picture of the situation of crime in this country, firstly, but also trust in the police. How do you think we can restore that trust? What do the police have to do?
It's really difficult for the police to manage the levels of trust the public have in them themselves, because the vast majority of people don't have direct dealings with the police or don't have many, and so they pick up what's going on and their attitudes are formed by what's reported in the media. And the media, unfortunately, in this country, and probably inevitably because of the way the media operates, have asymmetric reporting about policing. They don't report proportionately the good work done by police and the positive things to do with the police service in the same way that they report the negative things. There is a massive, massive skewing of the coverage towards the negative, and that helps form public opinion. In your introduction, you talked about firearms offences going up by a massive percentage, but firearms offences in this country are a relatively small number of offences. So a relatively small number of additional offences gives you a large percentage increase. So you need to be, wary of that. You also named two police officers, former police officers, whose offending was at just, appallingly high. But there are not dozens and dozens of other ones you could have named. You'd struggle to name anybody else in the same category, even historically. And so we need to be careful about how policing is reported and try and even up this asymmetric levels if we can.
Peter, I think some of what you say is perfectly reasonable. Of course, the media does report on things that go wrong, and that gets a lot more public interest as well. But also, people see what they see with their own eyes. And travelling around parts of this country, you do feel like it is a bit of a Wild West. There don't seem to be police officers available. There are young men causing trouble constantly. There is a fear, being a young woman or a young man walking around, that you could be harmed physically and no one would notice, no one would intervene because of the fear that someone could be carrying a knife. And then, of course, you have people who have smaller crimes but still significant crimes, robberies, thefts, etc., that it's hard to get a police officer even interested in.
It's not so much of being even interested. The issue is one of capacity. And that affects not only whether you see police officers around, which I agree you don't anywhere near as much as you should in a properly policed society, but it also means the officers that are there are constantly rushing from job to job, and then they really haven't got the time to do anything properly. And certainly not the softer stuff like keeping victims and witnesses informed and things like that are absolutely crucial to the investigation or prosecution. Now, you should be directing questions about the numbers of police officers to Theresa May and others who, it is no exaggeration to say, destroyed UK policing just short of its 200th anniversary. She destroyed it. She's ripped the heart out of it.
Peter, I agree with you, and people at home will certainly agree that reducing the number of police officers out on our streets has contributed to that feeling of being unsafe and contributing to the number of crimes on our streets. I think that very much likely is the case to be true. But is there anything that the police officers themselves are doing wrong? Because we hear quite a lot about how police officers are engaging in, whatever it is, social justice campaigns or, the wokery and things like this, taking the knee and going soft on protesters if they're for a trendy political cause and whatnot. When it comes to actually the dealing with crime investigations, do you think that police officers could be doing things better? Are we recruiting the best people?
The recruitment, because of the starting pay and the pay and conditions and the attitudes of the public that they're going to meet, recruiting is difficult. And so the bar is being lowered and lowered and lowered in terms of the recruits. That's not to say the majority of them aren't going to make really good police officers.
No, Peter, are you suggesting we've got subpar police officers? We're hiring rubbish police officers.
We're hiring people that wouldn't have made it through the higher levels or the higher bar of recruitment as it was 10 years plus ago because of the pay and conditions and because of the attitudes of the public. It's a bit of a sort of catch-22 situation, really. But there's certainly things that police officers could do. They could think a little bit more about how they're using social media, and especially in private groups on Facebook or on WhatsApp or such like. They don't need to be doing those things. That has nothing to do with the numbers or anything else. It's just levels of behaviour. But those levels of behaviour, the police officers are doing things that I would suggest are fairly commonplace out there in society. And so they need time during training. They need supervision and management in their first few years of service to stamp out any of those things. And the supervisors, the trainers and the managers are not there, and that is absolutely to do with capacity.
I do wonder if it's very difficult for police officers now out on the beat, out on the streets, when every person has a mobile phone that they can then video the police officer, intimidate in that way. It must be extremely difficult, and I do have a lot of respect for police officers. I just think something fundamental is going wrong. Thank you very much indeed. That was Peter Kirkham, former Met Police Detective Chief Inspector, giving the police view there. Now, joining me now is Zoe Dronfield, who is a domestic abuse survivor and campaigner. Zoe, I'm not sure if you were listening to that, but where do you think the police is going wrong in terms of trust?
Well, I think there's lots of things, really. I think first and foremost, there's no visibility of police these days. And yes, of course, it doesn't help when you've got the likes of Wayne Couzens and David Carrick. But also, the fact is that these so-called men, police officers who went on and did these awful crimes, there was reputations there before them around, you know, Rapey Dave, and these kind of names don't come from nowhere. And so, you know, what's going on within the police culture internally that this is allowed to happen? Have they not got a robust whistleblowing policy where other police officers can actually call this behaviour out? Because clearly there was behaviour and there was convictions. And, you know, the police officer, the ex-police officer that spoke before, you know, I just, for him to blame everything on the fact that the public are losing confidence, I don't think that's very fair. We're losing confidence because of what's going on with the, you know, the vile stuff internally that needs to be dealt with. And of course, what can we talk about in the media that is positive? Because actually, I've just been looking this morning at statistics on crimes being solved, and it's the lowest proportion ever. So there's something seriously going on. There's no proactive policing anymore. I've campaigned for the last 8 years for a serial perpetrator register of domestic abusers, which would mean that they would proactively track and monitor those most dangerous offenders. And it just seems that they just react to a lot of things. And I know that they're going to say that resource is an issue, but all of the public services are struggling and having to do more with less. And it's about changing the way that you work. And I just don't think having less police officers visible on our streets is helpful.
Well, no, and I think you make a very good point there when you say that people have experience of the police for themselves. They're not just manipulated by media reporting of one or two cases that have gone wrong. This is something that people see with their own eyes. I mean, even the relatively small stuff, like your car being nicked from outside your home, and then all you getting is a number that you then have to give to the insurance.
Yeah, exactly.
Small things like that.
Thing, isn't it?
Now, you're a domestic violence campaigner. That's what you campaign on. I'd like to ask you about the Nicola Bulley case. What are your thoughts on how it's been handled and what we've seen in the media and from the Lancashire police? Do you think this highlights something going wrong in the police as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, straight away when I listened to the police, you know, the report, and they came out and spoke, they're just always coming from a defensive position. And this is why I talk about the proactive policing. You know, the fact that they've then released information, private information about vulnerabilities at this late stage, it's, you know, it's questionable, isn't it? Why wasn't this released, if it is important, right back at the beginning? And of course, if you leave things late, there are going to be questions that are asked.
Yeah, there will be questions that are asked, and then they take, as you say, a very defensive stance. Now, just very quickly before you go, the Greater Manchester Police, that is the police force that you dealt with. Can you tell us a little bit about what that was like?
It was West Midlands Police, actually.
Oh, West Midlands, sorry.
Yes, West Midlands Police. But yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, the attitude of the police that I dealt with throughout going through domestic abuse was just horrific, to be honest. And even after what happened to me, you know, I'd almost been murdered, and I'd sent 3 text messages asking not to be contacted by my perpetrator from prison. It was witness intimidation, which he was convicted for. And I'd got a call from a police officer saying, on a Friday evening saying you're going to get in trouble for sending these 3 text messages, I could be up for a harassment charge for asking, my perpetrator's family to leave me alone. And the call kind of went like this. It was like, this is he called me on a Friday evening, said, you could be looking at a harassment charge. We want you to come into for a voluntary interview. I said, if I don't come in, what will happen? They said, well, you'll be arrested. I said, well, it's not voluntary then, is it? And then he said, I said, look, you do realise I'm a victim of domestic abuse. And he said, oh, you're not going to pull that one, are you? And these are the kind of attitudes and comments that cannot be made. It's just horrific.
I mean, that is quite extraordinary that they use that kind of language to talk to you. I mean, you would have thought that police officers would go through stringent training in how to talk to victims of violence and domestic violence when you must have been in a quite emotional and traumatic stage of your life, of course. And that's not the way you talk to a victim of violence. Sorry, we're going to have to end the interview there, but thank you so much for coming and talking to us on Alastair and Friends here on GB News. That was Zoe Dronfield, domestic abuse survivor and campaigner. Now, plenty more to come this afternoon with me, Emily Carver, after the break. Following Sir Keir Starmer's speech at the Scottish Labour conference this lunchtime, we'll be getting reaction straight from Edinburgh. But first, we're going to have a little look at the weather.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vaughtry here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Sunday is set to be another mild day for all of us, but exactly how it feels will vary across the country. It's that southwesterly flow of air feeding in from the Atlantic that's bringing us the mild weather, but areas in the south have high pressure in charge, keeping things fairly settled. But further to the north, we do have some frontal systems pushing their way across Scotland, so here it's going to be a bit of a wetter day, some heavier bursts of rain possible. A few patches of drizzle, maybe for Northern Ireland, parts of northern England, but generally the further south you are, it will stay drier, and actually some sunny intervals developing across parts of Wales and into southern areas of England. And when we get that sunshine, temperatures will be climbing towards highs of 15 degrees Celsius, quite mild for the time of year. It will still be mild further north, but we're going to see the breeze strengthening, and that will continue into this evening, turning really quite gusty, severe gales for a time across parts of Scotland, maybe up to 70-mile-an-hour gusts. This band of rain then pushing its way across parts of Scotland as well. A few spots of drizzle further south, the cloud tending to build a bit more throughout the night. But underneath that cloud, the vast majority of us will be staying frost-free once again, and it will be another mild night. Throughout Monday, that band of rain in the north is going to stall a bit across parts of Argyll and Bute in towards Stirling, so it could be a fairly damp day here. To the north of that, actually some decent sunny intervals, but remaining rather windy across Shetland. Further to the south, again, it will be a relatively cloudy day, some spats and spits of spots of drizzle possible, but going to be another mild one. 16 degrees is certainly possible. We'll hold on to the cloud for England, Wales, Northern Ireland throughout Monday evening. That band of rain in the north, though, will just begin to shift its way further towards parts of Lewis and Harrison into the Highlands. It will be another mild day on Tuesday, but rain later on in the day will signal a slight change for the middle part of the week, and we will start to see those temperatures falling a bit closer to average for the time of year. Bye-bye.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It is 2:31. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. Lancashire police, who are searching for a missing mother of two, have cordoned off a large area near the River Wire. Nicola Bulley disappeared just over 3 weeks ago in the village of St Michael's on Wire. The police have been working on the theory she fell into the river, but there has been increased activity in the last hour or two with divers and helicopters spotted circling the area. More on this as soon as we get it here on GB News. A Cabinet Minister says Boris Johnson's intervention on the Northern Ireland Protocol is not unhelpful. Mr Johnson's warning that scrapping the bill would be a great mistake comes a day after Rishi Sunak and the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said they'd made great progress on fixing problems with the post-Brexit trading arrangements. Now, the protocol bill introduced under Mr Johnson gives the UK the right to ignore EU rules. And the Leader of the House of Commons, Penny Mordaunt, believes that gives the government a stronger bargaining position.
I think, it's helpful to remind the EU that we have the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill. It's helpful to remind them what those expectations are. But I would also just say that, look, there are encouraging signs. There is, people are saying there's a lot more to do, but progress is being made.
Sir Keir Starmer says under no circumstances will Labour do a deal with the SNP. Addressing a party conference in Edinburgh, he urged Scottish voters to put their faith in Labour in the wake of Nicola Sturgeon's resignation, saying the tide is turning on the Tories and the SNP. Meanwhile, the leadership contest for the SNP has its first two candidates. Scottish Health Secretary Humza Yousaf and former Minister Ash Regan have announced their decisions to stand. They did that in the Sunday Mail earlier. Other potential candidates include Finance Secretary Kate Forbes and Mary McCallan. Nominations close on Friday. The winner will be announced at the end of March. TV online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Now, back to Emily.
Right, as the race to replace Nicola Sturgeon sees SNP candidates declaring, the Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has today urged SNP voters to ditch the party altogether and put their faith in Labour. Addressing the Scottish Labour conference earlier, he urged party members to reach out to their communities following Sturgeon's resignation. Let's head over to Edinburgh, where our Scotland reporter Tony Maguire is waiting for us. Tony, what was the reaction to Sir Keir Starmer?
Hello. Well, quite an emphatic response here from the delegates at the Scottish Labour conference. This morning I'd almost thought it was Keir Hardie that was showing up to speak today instead of the UK Labour leader. Certainly, they picked a fantastic week to host this conference here in Edinburgh. Obviously the beating heart of Scottish politics this week and seemingly all this year, the way it's shaping up. I think that the general consensus was that they were looking for certainly a lot of hope in the SNP support after the SNP at the minute certainly doesn't seem to be going anywhere. I think that the Scottish vote, which typically in the last few general elections has seen a huge swing towards the SNP, was certainly been blown wide open, and certainly Keir Starmer seems quite confident that Labour are in the best position for the taking. Certainly speaking to the conference, though, he didn't want to dwell too much on the leadership contest. He said that Labour won't change any hearts or minds just by sitting back and watching a battle for power within the SNP. But he did spend quite a lot of time reaching out to independent supporters, people who have put their trust in the SNP to govern and perhaps maybe feel that Scotland's governing party just now has come up quite short. But certainly accepting Scots and Tory Britain for a lot of Scottish supporters is actually the best way out of the UK would probably be for them. However, he's hoping that by putting their trust in Labour, that these Scots will be able to see a new way. And actually he focused on kind of three major things. Talking to Michael Portillo earlier on, I actually had said that he hadn't mentioned the NHS, but in fact I had to run out the room there to speak to Michael. But he did bring up the NHS and of course the issues that are most concerning for people of Scotland: ambulance waiting times, GP appointments, and obviously the general dissatisfaction of our nurses and doctors. You know, these aren't just big problems for Scotland, these are actually problems for all the UK, and for that reason, again, that throwing up a border, a fresh border within the UK Isles was not the solution. So certainly, apart from that, the economy, cost of living, of course, here in Edinburgh, as it is everywhere else in the UK, a huge issue. His plan for more green jobs and better, cleaner energy, Scotland, understandably, is at the forefront of that. And what he was hoping for is that his green prosperity plan will bring cheaper energy bills, more energy jobs, and energy independence from, you know, oil tyrants like Vladimir Putin. But I think perhaps most interesting for me anyway, as a journalist here in Scotland, was his talk of devolution, some quite profitable things for the people of Scotland, and not just Scotland. You know, he wants to see power move away from Westminster to Holyrood and actually all the devolved governments around the UK, so that people in the communities around these isles can actually build themselves up and contribute to a much brighter future. So overall, this conference here this weekend, it's interesting to see Scottish Labour and Labour in general actually have a good swagger in their step. After obviously the last few years, Ian Murray MP, of course, quite famously at the last general election, the only Labour MP north of the border. But, you know, if Labour do get into power next year, then perhaps come the next Scottish general election by 2026 at the latest, perhaps the Scottish people will also put their faith in the Labour government.
Thank you very much indeed, Tony, for bringing us that latest from up in Edinburgh. It does seem like the Scottish Labour does have a swagger in its step. I'm sure Keir Starmer does too. Thank you very much indeed. Now you're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends with me, Emily Carver. We've got plenty more still to come this afternoon, so stay tuned. London will turn to dust. That's what Vladimir Solivov, a propagandist for Putin, said publicly this week. How worried should we be? Is it all bravado? I'll be finding out more after this quick break.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. You're with Emily Carver standing in for Alastair Stewart on GB News. Now I have Catherine Forster back in the studio with me. We've got some breaking news on the Nicola Bulley case.
Sad news, I'm afraid. The police in the last few minutes have put on their Facebook page that a body has been recovered from the River Wyre. Now, it's important to say the body has not been identified, but Nicola Bulley's family have been informed that a body has been found. Now, the police say that they received a call at 11:36 this morning from people saying that they had seen a body in the river. They sent specialist search teams. The area was cordoned off very quickly, drones, helicopters, etc., divers. They found a body, they've recovered the body. Identification is yet to take place, but obviously the family have been hoping that she had left the area, that she was safe. So this is a very significant development.
Very significant. Can we expect, of course we've just learnt this news, but can we expect some kind of statement, some press conference of sorts?
I would imagine so. I guess it depends on how long it takes for formal identification to take place.
Goodness me. Well, we've got a statement from the police. I think you have it to hand.
I've only got a couple of notes that I wrote, and basically what I have told you.
It's up on the screen for those viewing at home. I will read it out. This morning, Sunday 19th February, you may be aware of police activity around the river near to St Michael's. We want to provide you with an update on that activity. We were called today at 11:35 a.m. to reports of a body in the River Wyre, close to Rawcliffe Road. An underwater search team and specialist officers have subsequently attended the scene, entered the water and have sadly recovered a body. No formal identification has yet been carried out, so we are unable to say whether this is Nicola Bulley at this time. Procedures to identify the body are ongoing. We are currently treating the death as unexplained. Nicola's family have been informed of developments and our thoughts were with them at the most difficult of times. We ask that their privacy is respected. Well, there you go. There's the statement from Lancashire Police. We will, of course, bring you the very latest as we hear it on that tragic case, the mysterious case. We await to hear confirmation of who that body belongs to. Thank you very much, Catherine, for bringing us that latest breaking news. Now, we will be moving on to something very different. Vladimir Solovov, he's a propagandist for Putin, has said publicly this week that London will turn to dust. This came after Rishi Sunak pledged to assist Ukraine by providing long-range missiles to Kyiv in their fight back against Russia. How nervous should we be about this? And is the UK's ability to provide supplies to Ukraine mean that our military is going without or running short? Just how much do we trust our military? We're talking about trust in the police. How much do we trust our armed forces? So to unpack all of this, I'm joined now by Lieutenant General Stuart Crawford, who is a defence analyst. Thank you very much indeed for joining us this afternoon, Stuart. For those who didn't see the outburst from Putin's number one propagandist, what was he saying?
Well, basically, it's yet another iteration of Russian saber-rattling, threatening escalation if the West continues to support Ukraine as it has been doing, and in my opinion, as it should do. I think there's virtually zero chance of London being turned to dust. And the reason being that attack on the UK by the Russians would invoke Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty, and Russia would find itself at war with NATO. And as I've said so many times before, if it comes to direct confrontation between NATO and Russia, Russia will lose and will lose badly. So I think we can take this with a pinch of salt.
Have you noticed a change in Russian propaganda? Is it becoming more and more extreme?
Well, I think it is. I think there's also the domestic issue that whilst the media in Russia is controlled by the state, it's becoming ever more difficult to conceal the fact that the special military operation in Ukraine is going badly for the Russians. And this is a case of people either returning, sadly, in body bags or returning from the front after having done their stint. And so the Russian public is more aware of the realities of what's going on in Ukraine. And I think that you're quite right that the Russian propaganda is getting slightly more shrill than perhaps it was a year ago, because they know that they're not winning.
Now, the majority of Brits, I believe, are in support of the UK, in support of our government spending a lot on helping Ukraine defend itself. But there are concerns about, as the war continues, that there is no end in sight. What can the military do and what can the government do to ensure that we continue to have enough supplies in this country if, God forbid, some other military exercise was needed? Because we are sending lots of ammunition to Ukraine.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're absolutely right. And the quick answer is that the defence budget needs a significant uplift, both to replace the stuff that has been sent to Ukraine in terms of anti-tank weapons and tanks and other supplies, etc., but also to build up our military. It's a common phrase, the military has been hollowed out by successive budget cuts. And there's no doubt that that is absolutely the case, to the extent that there are some doubts and some realistic doubts about whether we actually have much of an army to contribute. I would take the Royal Air Force and the Royal Navy out of that equation at the moment because they have seen significant enhancement. But the army is probably in a pretty poor shape for any sort of expeditionary warfare, certainly in Europe at the moment.
And we've seen Rishi Sunak, he's been at the Munich Security Conference calling on everyone to give as much military help as possible to Ukraine. How much influence do you believe our Prime Minister has on the international stage? Do you think if we budge, other countries follow?
Well, that was the case with the issue of sending main battle tanks to Ukraine, where the UK was first out of the traps, if you like, by pledging to send 14 Challenger 2 tanks to Ukraine. And that sort of opened the floodgates slightly. So now we have Germany sending Leopard 2 tanks. Canada has already supplied some, and lots of other Western standard NATO tanks, not all of them completely and utterly cutting-edge technology, but good enough for the job, and more importantly, in sufficient numbers to sustain the effort. And I think that the numbers are the important thing, rather than the top-end quality of what we provide to the Ukrainians.
Thank you very much. And can I just very quickly, just while I've got you, ask you, how has Putin's strategy changed? Do we know what his plans are? We heard about a new offensive being planned for the first-year anniversary. How are things going on his end? Is he achieving what he wants to at this moment?
Well, right from the very beginning, nobody has really known what's in Putin's mind. But I would say that he's been thwarted in his initial aim, as I think everybody knows. And we're now in this sort of stalemate situation where I think the Russians are desperately keen not to give up what they've got, and the Ukrainians are desperately keen to recover what they've lost. In the end, all wars end by compromise. But I don't think we've got to a point yet where either side is prepared to compromise to bring peace.
No, it doesn't seem so. Thank you very much indeed for joining us this afternoon, Lieutenant General Stuart Crawford, Defence Analyst. Now, moving on. Politicians from across the political divide have condemned plans to hold a protest outside a hotel which is housing asylum seekers. The protest, which will be taking place in Newquay in Cornwall within the week, has been described as racist. Our GB News reporter Jeff Moody went to find out more.
Oleg Ignatiev owns the Newquay Beach Hotel. He's decided to open his hotel 24/7 to offer refuge to anyone fearing for their safety.
You're in Newquay, it's a small community, and a lot of people frequently post about their concerns on Facebook, and people rally around them. And the post said that that there have been people who are being followed at night, and in the comments you could see there's a lot of people who were also concerned because they had a similar experience. So it made sense that because we're open 24/7, it made a lot of sense that we would be a place that people could come into and feel, safe. And if they needed to, we could call the police and we could keep them safe whilst, they were being, if they were being followed or anything else.
Locals are reporting being followed home, not feeling safe on their streets. Some blame the influx of asylum seekers currently housed in a popular Newquay hotel, and it's making the community angry. And it's that anger that's really beginning to worry police. Tempers are frayed, feelings are running high, and the idea that a protest coupled with a counter-protest at the same time could spill into something far more serious. Like Knowsley in Liverpool, last week 15 people were arrested after protests outside a hotel housing migrants. A police officer and 2 members of the public suffered minor injuries and a police van was set on fire. Police are anxious the same doesn't happen in Cornwall. In a statement, Devon and Cornwall Police told GB News, "We are aware of a planned protest due to take place in Newquay. We are seeking to engage with the protest organisers. Police will facilitate peaceful protest and use relevant legislation to keep communities safe. We will continue to review any information received regarding this matter." GB News approached the organisers of the protest as well as the organisers of the counter-protest, but no one was able to speak to us. Politicians have been unanimous in calling for the planned protest to be abandoned, but GB News' Nigel Farage believes it's wrong to dub the action as far-right.
Already the Conservative leader of Cornwall Council has condemned what they're doing as racist. The Labour Party have joined in as well. And now a collection of various refugee charities have got together today. They claim they represent up to 500 groups around the country, calling on government to condemn protests against those that cross the English Channel, filling up our hotels. I'll tell you what's going on here. They are trying to suppress any comment, any criticism of what is going on a massive scale around our communities.
Police must now toe a fine line between allowing free speech and keeping the peace. Jeff Moody, GB News.
Thank you very much to Jeff Moody there, bringing us that very, very interesting report from Newquay. Now, let's get your thoughts on trust in the police that we were discussing earlier in the show. Derek has to say, if you are convicted of a violent crime between the ages of 19 and 25, you should have to join the army instead of going to prison. Well, there might be some benefits in doing that. It might get them to behave a little better and have a bit more pride in themselves and their country, perhaps. Mark says, if I get burgled today, the police would probably not attend. But if I say something right-wing or anti-woke on social media, you can be sure that at least 2 police officers will turn up at my door and tell me to adjust my thinking. The police are no longer fit for purpose and cannot be trusted. They are also bereft of respect. Yes, the police officer did say that it's all down to funding, that the police aren't trusted any longer. But I think is actually the way that they behave sometimes. Judith says the police are not given enough power. They have to take being politically correct above and beyond, despite the abuse they receive and putting their own lives in danger. She goes on, they have to deal with so much disrespect from some of the public. I can't believe anyone wants to join the police force. Well, that is all we have time for today on Alastair Stewart and Friends. Thank you very much indeed. It's been a pleasure and a privilege to stand in for the man himself. He'll be back next week.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Sunday is set to be another mild day for all of us, but exactly how it feels will vary across the country. It's that southwesterly flow of air feeding in from the Atlantic that's bringing us the mild weather, but areas in the south have high pressure in charge, keeping things fairly settled. But further to the north, we do have some frontal systems pushing their way across Scotland, so here it's going to be a bit of a wetter day, some heavier bursts of rain possible. A few patches of drizzle, maybe for Northern Ireland, parts of northern England, but generally the further south you are, it will stay drier, and actually some sunny intervals developing across parts of Wales and into southern areas of England. And when we get that sunshine, temperatures will be climbing towards highs of 15 degrees Celsius, quite mild for the time of year. It will still be mild further north, but we're going to see the breeze strengthening, and that will continue into this evening, turning really quite gusty, severe gales for a time across parts of Scotland, maybe up to 70-mile-an-hour gusts. This band of rain then pushing its way across parts of Scotland as well. A few spots of drizzle further south, the cloud tending to build a bit more throughout the night. But underneath that cloud, the vast majority of us will be staying frost-free once again, and it will be another mild night. Throughout Monday, that band of rain in the north is going to stall a bit across parts of Argyll and Bute in towards Stirling, so it could be a fairly damp day here. To the north of that, actually some decent sunny intervals, but remaining rather windy across Shetland. Further to the south, again, it will be a relatively cloudy day, some spats and spits of spots of drizzle possible, but going to be another mild one. 16 degrees is certainly possible. We'll hold on to the cloud for England, Wales, Northern Ireland throughout Monday evening. That band of rain in the north, though, will just begin to shift its way further towards parts of Lewis and Harrison into the Highlands. It will be another mild day on Tuesday, but rain later on in the day will signal a slight change for the middle part of the week, and we will start to see those temperatures falling a bit closer to average for the time of year. Bye-bye.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud